Okay. Well, thank you, Kath, and good evening, everybody, as you're joining in. Welcome to our first garden presentation of our second series. For many of you, hopefully you all enjoyed the first series of last year, and this year, our series will begin in the center of Canada, in the wonderful province of Saskatchewan. We will be bringing you other presentations, of course, as the year goes by from elsewhere in Canada. And this year, participants will be coming to us from the United States and from Europe and Africa. So we hope that you will continue on this wonderful garden journey with us throughout 2022 as we drift away from the pandemic, hopefully. So this presentation, again, is being brought to you by Canadensis, the Botanical Garden Society. Canadensis, the Garden of Canada, Le Jardin du Canada, is a project in the making. It will see the creation of a national botanic garden in Ottawa, our nation's capital. Of course, as most of you know, what Canadensis means, it's a Latin term used in a lot of plant identification, and it means of Canada. And to find out more about Canadensis, including the vision for Canadensis, how to become a member, how to donate, we invite you to visit our website at jardincanadensis.ca. And of course, if you have specific questions you want to ask about Canadensis, we put the Canadensis email in the chat box, and please use that one to communicate. At the end of the presentation, Kath will ensure that most, if not all, of the questions that are asked will be addressed to our guests this evening, and we will have that interaction at that time. So I'd like to now present our first speaker of the series. And this evening's presentation comes to us from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and will be given by Alan Weninger, a microbiologist, horticulturalist, and arborist. He is the curator for the Patterson Garden Arboretum at the University of Saskatchewan for the past 17 years. Alan's focus is on plant taxonomy and botany, specializing in woody plants. He is working to expand the Arboretum collection to include as many prairie-adaptable and Canadian species as possible, making the Patterson Arboretum an oasis for plant diversity in the heart of the prairies. In his spare time away from work, his passion for plants does not wane, as he tends to his personal collection of woody plants at his rural residence, something that he has enjoyed doing since the young age of 10, believe it or not. As some of you may know, the planting zone for Saskatoon in New Saskatchewan is Zone 2B. 2B, in itself a unique challenge, and I'm sure that Alan would share some of these challenges with us. So please sit back and enjoy as Alan shares his passion, his vision, and plans for this unique garden in Saskatoon. Alan.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction, Jerry. Yeah, very excited to be doing this today. We here at the horticulture field lab where I work, we think a lot about Patterson Garden and always thinking about how to keep it up nicely, keep it healthy, add more specimens, and it's not well known, so this is a great opportunity. I'm just gonna share my screen. I'm being helped by Jackie here, and she's pushing the buttons. So if anything goes wrong, it's her fault. Just kidding.
Maybe ask him. Can you see my screen?
Can everyone? Is my screen visible? I think so.
Nope, not yet.
Oh, Uh-oh.
We see you.
Okay.
Let's go back.
Share screen.
Select window or screen.
Allow.
Oh, there.
Oh, the PowerPoint.
That one, right?
Yep. Okay, this is Jackie beside me.
Jackie's awesome.
Sorry.
We love Jackie.
The
Everyone
red,
thinks
the red
Jackie.
shirt. Whenever you see a red shirt flash into the window, that's
Now can you see it?
That looks great. Thank you.
okay. Good. Yeah. So, yeah, where I work, it's called Patterson Garden Arboretum, and it's part of the University of Saskatchewan. And I work for the Department of Plant Sciences. Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge that the university and the Arboretum are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. This year, or I guess it's last year now, we celebrated 100 years since our Hort department So this, just to get our orientation right, this is where I officially work, kind of behind this sign, and through that gate, it's the horticulture field lab. The Arboretum is part of the field lab. There's also vegetable fields and fruit orchards. The Arboretum is the public part of our research area. Some of the people I work with, on the bottom left is Jackie Bantle. She's the manager of the field lab. And to celebrate 100 years, she planted the flowers out front there. And she's the one that's sitting beside me, helping me with the technical things. On the top left is Neil Labar, and he tells me he's not the mechanic. He does mechanical work all the time, but officially he does all kinds of things, and he helps me in the Arboretum when we're removing trees or doing some pruning. And in this picture, he's doing a field repair on our lawnmower in Patterson. I'll call it Patterson. It's much easier than saying Patterson Garden Arboretum. Every year we get a summer student, and the photograph on the right is our summer student Dane for last year. The Arboretum itself it's made up of rows, and that's strangely, that's a design that I really like, and I'll explain that later. It's about 2 hectares, and if you look at it from the air, it's just a big square. So it sounds kind of dull, but it's a very nice place. Some more orientation. That's the university, the main campus of the university in the background. So the Arboretum is kind of kitty corner from the university. Despite being so close, it's sometimes hard for people to find. It's hidden behind some hedges. But if you go to our website, you can get information on how to get there easily. It was quite an experience being up in the aerial lift. This picture was taken from an aerial lift that we rented so that we could prune the poplar trees and some of the other tall trees. And yeah, just seeing it from this perspective was really interesting. We currently have close to 1,000 specimens and we add, every year we add about 30 or 40. And so I can summarize by saying it's getting very crowded, but we have a really good selection. There's all kinds of different things. Just about everything that survives on the prairies is planted here. To the south of us are agricultural fields. We're kind of surrounded by agricultural fields that the university set aside years ago. And when I was learning about Canadensis and their plan to make a botanic garden right in the heart of Ottawa in some green space, I just thought, what a great idea to have that. It's available for all the people of the city, and you know, it would be a great thing for this university too. Anyway, thanks Canadensis for that. We have a website where you can get a lot of information. As I said, how to get there to start with, and how to get to the Arboretum, but also all about the history and well, everything. Sometimes we're known as Saskatoon's secret garden. We're not a garden that's like promoted in any way, except we have tours and occasionally magazine articles. So a lot of people still don't know about Patterson Arboretum, and but that's changing. So a few hundred years ago, this area was grassland. The trees grow in it really well now, but the soil is a very rich, deep soil created by prairie grasses. So we're very fortunate to have this good soil. It's clay-based, pH about 7.8. The winters here, there's a window just above me here, and the winters are fairly difficult. There's times when it gets down to -40. This year we've already seen lots of -30 days or nights. So it's quite a challenge for plants, but I'm always shocked at how many different species can actually tolerate the cold. And I think they just really shut down for the winter. Like warmer climates, sometimes trees get fooled into thinking it's winter and then get frozen, but the seasons are really well defined here. And it makes it kind of fun and interesting to try different plants, because the expectations for things growing in Saskatchewan are really low. So anything that survives is quite fun. In comparison, our summers have a lot of heat and long growing days because we're in a northern location. Storms in the summer that bring a lot of rain. Every once in a while we have a drought like we did this past year, but in general it's really good for plant growth. So any tree that manages to make it through the winter will really appreciate the summer here. The Arboretum is open all year long. Well, I'll just say this is a Chinese red pine. I'm really a taxonomy nerd, so I'm going to be telling you all about the plants that we have. Chinese red pine, It's about 17 years old and it's producing cones. And we're open from sunrise to sunset, although there's no gate, so anyone can get in. But that's our recognized hours. This is from the website, and I'm just going to go over a bit about how the Arboretum got its start. Morden, Manitoba, in looks like 1959, decided to do an experiment that would take in all the prairie provinces. So they wanted to see which trees and shrubs would survive in the different parts of the prairies. And there are big differences, even though it's one big area that might look all the same at first glance, but there's some different zones in there and different say moisture levels. So it was a very interesting experiment. So what they did is they asked, I'm assuming they asked, if there was any institutions like universities or research areas like agriculture research stations, that's the term I was looking for. If there's any research stations that wanted to participate, and if they did want to participate, they would have trees sent to them that they could plant and observe. And all the institutions had to do was take yearly notes on how the trees were doing. And at the end of the experiment, Morden, the research station at Morden, put all the results together and had a good overview of how different trees and shrubs survive in the prairie provinces. This is in our Arboretum. Well, all the pictures are actually. So this is a scarlet oak, and I've had the opportunity to visit a lot of the other institutions. Sometimes it's university campuses like the University of Edmonton. Sometimes it's research stations like Brooks, Alberta, where they still have an Arboretum, and see some of the trees that were distributed during the main part of the experiment. So scarlet oak, and anyone that gets a chance to go to Morden, Manitoba and have a look at the Arboretum there, you can see kind of the parent trees that this scarlet oak came from. I've seen another scarlet oak at the CDC North in Edmonton. And often I can see cork trees here and there that have still survived over the years. Patterson Arboretum is one of the few arboretums that survived. A lot of times, well, I shouldn't say that. I should say it's one of the ones that's kept up a bit better. Patterson and the CDC South, so Brooks, Alberta, has established an arboretum, and more still keeps up its arboretum. But we're very lucky that Patterson Arboretum survived. A little bit about Cecil Patterson, that the Arboretum is named in honor of. He was the head of horticulture, as I mentioned, starting in 1922, and almost 40 years following that. He published papers, he assisted with the landscaping on campus, papers and books to help with people understand prairie gardening. And he did breeding work with things like potatoes and lilies. And he also did breeding work with fruit trees. And in his honor, we've planted a Patterson Pride plum in our Arboretum. And here is going back to the opening ceremony. So you can see the plaque that I just showed you. The previous photo is covered there with a cloth. So this photo would have been taken it's my understanding that it was taken in 1969. The first trees in the Arboretum were apparently planted in 1966. So yeah, it's very interesting for me to look back at this photograph and see how things looked at that time. Like the grass rows are very wide, and of course the trees are small. The person holding the microphone is Dr. Stu Nelson. He was the head of the department that took over from Dr. Patterson. And on the left is Dr. Patterson's wife, Laura. And there's two other people that we're not exactly sure who they are. So if anyone has any thoughts, you can let us know. And I purposely put this photograph to follow the black and white one that I just showed, just to show what time can do. This photograph I took about, it would have been about 40 years after the previous photograph. It was a wet spring, so everything's looking very lush. Speaking of wet springs, we've had flooding in the Arboretum that it really affected a lot for years to come, because slowly after the water receded, we lost a lot of big trees. But we're fairly confident we fixed this problem, and we shouldn't have any floods that sit for days before we can clear them. This is a former student. Not even though we lost a lot of big old trees during those wet years, there are plants that really love that. Some of you might recognize what this is. It's a button bush. It's a eastern North American plant. It's now planted in the front corner of the Arboretum, where the water tends to go even during the spring melt. So it's a semi-aquatic species. There is a part of our Arboretum that never floods, and that's where all the pines and spruce and fir trees grow the best. So it's the southwest corner. And it's also a useful place for planting trees and shrubs that really need good drainage. They don't mind water, but they really need good drainage. So that's where I'm currently planting plants like desert type plants. Pre-COVID times, we would have several tours every year. This is one of the bigger ones. It was organized by the alumni, university alumni group, and it was well advertised, and so we hope to get back to that as soon as possible. I mentioned the rows of the Arboretum, and one of the reasons I really like them is it allows everyone to get really close to the specimens. And people go for walks down these rows, like up and down, and it works, because even though it's a small space, you're always seeing something new. The rows also allow us to maintain the Arboretum really easily, relatively easily. So this is our pneumatic pruning setup, and yeah, we can get everywhere we need to get to, and it makes it easy for spreading mulch. So when we prune, we try to shred up as much of the branches as we can and deposit them along the rows. That mulch will be spread out. And it's a really good recycling approach. It's kind of throwing dead trees, chopped up trees back on living trees, but it really works. And this is freshly mulched area. And another reason that I really like the rose is I personally, I think it's beautiful. It's a combination of like the straight lines of people and the unpredictability of plants, especially wild plants. So I think it really works in a garden setting. The Morden experiment ended in the year 2001, so they stopped sending seedlings to us. But we've been planting again, and there's trees that died, and there's spaces that open up, and but also I've kind of subdivided and divided all the spaces between the existing trees. The trees go in as seedlings generally. We grow most of our specimens from seed. Sometimes we purchase small seedlings, but everything goes in when it's really small. So that's why the stakes are there to keep things from being stepped on. This is a little Pinus canadensis, so Korean pine. Also going in when seedlings going in when they're small, it's hoped that they'll establish a very good root system that will keep them, upright during windstorms, and they'll also develop really good roots that can tap into the moisture when they need to. Is the mushroom. I think I put this picture on the website. It's a little cycle of life picture. There's the dead stump, and there's the mushroom growing out of it, and there's the new tree to replace the dead one. I take a lot of pictures of the old labels. We have, as I mentioned, we have a lot of sunshine on the prairies, and relatively clean air way out here in Saskatoon. So the lichens grow really well. So this is an older label, but I also noticed as I was going through this slideshow that it's not quite accurate. Philadelphus virginalis, it should be Philadelphus X virginalis because it's a hybrid, not a species. And just a bit more about naming. As many of you might know, there's been a lot of research, DNA research into plants. There's been a lot of reclassification, a lot of renaming. So we have a big collection of potentilla, but now it's all Dasyphora. And I've also seen it called Pentaphyloides. So we have a lot of adjusting to do with the labels. We started working on that. There was some money available because of the 100 years of horticulture, and we're doing a lot of work on getting some new labels out. Something new that we added to the labels on the bottom left corner, Ericaceae. So we're adding the plant family. On the right bottom, it says Northeast Asia. So we're also including where the plant is from in the wild. And something else we're adding this year is if it's from a wild plant, then that's significant for conservation reasons. So we want to say that it is a wild plant so people will know. And yes, we can grow rhododendrons in Saskatoon. The other thing that we have to keep on top of are the specimens what the label says they are. So we have a scarlet oak that I pointed out earlier, and I'm often looking at it and trying to figure out whether it's a scarlet oak or a northern pin oak. And here I am pondering that. No, I actually don't know what I was pondering at this moment, but I'm pondering it now. And this is a day that was a few weeks when the Arboretum was very smoky, and it gave it a really interesting mystical appearance. The famous fires in BC, and also from northern Saskatchewan, where we have a lot of forest that catches fire as part of its regular natural, I don't know what you call it, cycles. When the Arboretum was first planted, it was meant to be just a test to see what would survive here, and also a teaching tool for students and the public. These days, with so much habitat loss and diseases that are moving around the globe, there's a new need for conservation. So this is a picture of a butternut tree, and the butternut trees in eastern Canada and eastern USA, like the natural habitat of the butternut tree, they're all dying from a butternut canker. Saskatoon is a fairly isolated spot, so it's important to have all the species we can, I think, here as a little bit of insurance that a species won't be wiped out. And butternut, for instance, is something that you can't just keep it in a seed bank, because the seed just can't keep. It's an oily nut, and so you have to always be. You can't just put it away in a vault in Norway. You have to have this backup living specimens to keep it going. This is another rare plant, mostly because it's very rare in the wild. It's a Korean cedar. It's from northern China and Korea. Very few individual specimens in the wild, and it's not the kind of thing that people like to plant. You'll never see it in a garden center. It has a kind of an unusual and unpredictable form. So if it wasn't for botanic gardens and arboretums, some of these plants just would be threatened with extinction. So we're very, very lucky to have this Korean cedar in the collection. This is a Plains cottonwood. It's a tree that in the city of Saskatoon on the riverbank, a massive tree, and I'm not sure. This specimen came from Morden, so I'm not sure exactly where it originated. They probably collected it as a cutting on the prairies, but ideally, I would like to see our arboretum contain native plants that are native to the Saskatoon area, native to the prairie area in general, and collected as close to the city here as possible, as long as we can guarantee it's a wild species. Wild plum, so Prunus americana. This is found in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and further into eastern Canada. Its fruit trees are interesting because people also wouldn't plant them if it wasn't for the fruit. So if you see a plum anywhere in the city or country that's not wild, then it's probably planted for its fruit. But this particular plant would have the wild genetics. And those wild genetics are really important for breeding programs. They're important just on their own right as an organism in this world that needs to be protected. American hop hornbeam, an interesting tree. It's found all the way into Manitoba. Birch family. Once again, something you would only see in an arboretum. It's just not quite pretty enough to make it into regular commerce. Another one along the same lines, this is a downy arrowwood, also east of Saskatoon, in Manitoba. Further east into Ontario, we have a very large silver maple. You can't tell from this picture, but that branch is hanging down, and this is early spring. It's one of the first trees to flower in the Arboretum, although it often goes unnoticed. That little cluster is probably the size of a quarter, so it's not that showy. And we're also trying to collect as many Canadian species as possible. So right now I'm looking into the Carolinian forest zone in southern Ontario. And when I started, we planted a Kentucky coffee tree. That's what this is. And a few years ago, I noticed it was flowering, which is a very good sign. And I climbed up on a ladder and took a picture. But then I could see that the flowers were male flowers, and so we won't get the seed pods from this specimen. But ideally, I'd like to have more Kentucky coffee trees, at least in the vicinity here. So we do have one on the front border. Another Eastern Canadian tree. This is a yellow birch flowering in the spring. And even though yellow birch grows to a very large size in the east, it's a small tree here. It's about the size of a crab apple, but it flowers and sets its seed, and so all the biological interest of this species is here. It's just here on the prairies, things might grow a lot smaller if they're used to a moist, warmer climate. We also like to experiment kind of in extreme ways. This is another Carolinian species. This is a tulip tree, which managed to live for about 5 years or more in the Arboretum before it died. So very sad, but very encouraging, because this tells me that if we collected Kentucky coffee tree seed from the very northern part of tulip tree seed from the very northern part of its range, we might get it to survive maybe 10 years or 15 years. This is a white ash, another Eastern Canadian species. Devil's walking stick, Aurelia spinosa, and when the picture got cropped, it cut out the spiny stem, but there's definitely a reason why it's called Devil's walking stick, which you can see when you visit the Arboretum. It's nasty. This is an American smoke tree. It's native to southeastern United States, so Tennessee, Texas. Kind of a surprise, but they're quite hardy. It's doing quite well. It's still very small, but it's been getting through the winters fine, and it gets brilliant red leaves in the fall. I wish I had more pictures of plants from the U.S. to show you, because we've been experimenting a lot with plants from high altitude deserts in the United States, and things are surviving really well. I think as I mentioned before, if a plant makes it through the winter, they really grow well in the summer. And I know that in the higher elevations of the American Southwest, it can get quite cold. We also have plants from BC, but when I was looking for photos, I couldn't find them. Plants that you wouldn't normally see in even collections. So we have Western larch, which is technically it's the biggest larch species in the world, and it grows in Alberta, but it's almost completely absent from collections. We have a white bark pine that we got from the Alberta Forest Research Station at Smoky Lake, which is very rare in cultivation and threatened with white pine blister rust. So it's really good that we have a few of those species. Of course, we can grow trees from Europe. So this is alpine currant in the fall. Swiss stone pine, very well adapted to our climate from Central Europe, the Alps in Central Europe. Just a slow growing tree. And that's a Swiss stone pine cone. And further east into Central Asia, this is Caragana aurantiaca. And Caragana, of course, grow fairly well here. We have the heat that they like. The common Caragana is an invasive species in the wrong environment, like the riverbank in Saskatoon. So we're making some attempt to let people know that what's an invasive species, or not include them at all. But sometimes there's ways to get around that, like if it's like a European buckthorn that where the sexes, they have male and female trees, so male and female flowers. So if we plant the male tree, then there's less chance of it, no chance of it producing seed and getting spread around, but it's there for people to identify. And that's a very important part of the Arboretum too. Another Central Asian plant, this is from the Tian Shan Mountains, Western China and Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. The mountains, they're called the Heavenly Mountains. So this is a Tian Shan mountain ash. And this particular tree has proved a real challenge for us because we want to keep the specimens alive when they start showing signs that they're getting old and dying. I've tried to start this from cuttings with no success so far. And if you collect the seed, the seed will be hybridized seed. I've tried putting bags around the flowers so that it would just pollinate itself, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't produce seed. So when I plant specimens in the Arboretum now, whenever I can, and if it works for the type of tree and the space, I try and put two specimens in so that they can, so that this won't be so much of a problem in the future. Ideally, we would propagate things from cuttings just to keep that pure genetics going. Plants from China, there's a lot of plants from China that grow well in the Saskatoon area. This is a Chinese juniper, Juniperus chinensis. So there's actually 3 large, like tree-sized junipers that would survive on the prairies. But once again, you would rarely see them outside of an arboretum. The other 2 are Rocky Mountain juniper, which is native to Canada, and Eastern red cedar, which is also a native Canadian tree. Another Asian species, this is Max euonymus. This is a species lilac, Syringa pubescens, variety Patula, I think. Species lilacs are fairly rare, but we're trying to increase the amount of them that we have. We're trading seeds with botanic gardens, and we're getting quite a few species lilacs in the collection. Ammermachia, this is a Asian species from the Amur region in Asia, along the Amur River that borders China and Russia. So It's quite an interesting plant. This is a Japanese linden, Japanese emperor oak. And this is one of our big surprises, although I'm always hoping for the best, but we grew these from seed. This is a Calopanax. It's also called Castor Aurelia, native to Northeast Asia. Pretty close. I think it's mostly a sort of more coastal species, but it's growing in the moister, more protected spot in our arboretum. I call this area the Goldilocks zone because it's near the front, so there's lots of moisture, and it's protected from the west from the wind. So it's from the Aurelia family. This one. We also have cultivars, especially plants with flowers, big flowers like roses, crabapples, mock orange, lilacs. We have lots of cultivars, and some of them are from the prairie region, which is a significant thing for our arboretum. And some of them simply aren't available in commerce and haven't been preserved. So a few times I've had people that are really into roses that visit the arboretum, and they've told me that we have some roses that are almost non-existent anywhere else right now. As I mentioned, a lot of crabapple cultivars. This is right near the front, and it looks quite pretty in the spring. When all blooming at the same time, you get pinks and whites and reds, and time's running out. But actually, I'm getting close to the end. So with such a diverse plant life, we also have a lot of different birds. Here's a robin tucked its nest away in a thorny little bush. Yeah, if I could hear everyone say, "Ah."
Aw.
Thank you, Jackie. This is a jackrabbit, a baby jackrabbit that I saw a few years ago, and it looked at me for a while, and then it kind of bounced and went between my boots and sniffed around, and I have a video of it that I was going to put in here so that you could all see, and maybe I could win the prize for the video that you remember the most. But anyway, eventually I will hate this rabbit because they eat all the little trees. But for now, we had our moment. We have a lot of different insects in the Arboretum. Sometimes I see them and take a picture. Sometimes they just show up in a picture of a flower that I've taken. This one is called confused haplopa moth. And I'm not sure why it's confused. And this, if you look closely, there's some little bugs walking around on here. And I did a little tour with some bug obsessed people, and they said, "Oh, look at that label. It's full of these wasps." So yeah, it's a bit like Horton Here's a Who, tiny little world, but it just reminds me that there's all kinds of levels of life in the Arboretum. And I try and list those on the website. A crab spider. They kind of lay waiting and pounce on things that get close. In there. Elegant starburst lichen. I take a lot of pictures of these old labels. well, this is a coral fungus, but it had a more impressive name, but that's okay. That's okay, Jackie. I'll move along. And this one, yeah, I asked my son if he could help me identify it because he's really big into mushroom ID, but there's a lot of mushrooms that look like this way. But he referred me to a genus. It's brittle stem fungus or something like that. But this one, we also have slime molds apparently. So I took this picture thinking it was some kind of fungus, but it's actually called dog's vomit slime mold. And this pretty well wraps up the talk. And this is my back to reality slide. This is what the Arboretum looks like right now. Very, very frozen. And currently it's surrounded by a 10-foot rental fence because it was being kind of decimated by a herd of deer. So we've managed to keep them out, and we're looking forward to spring to tally up the damage and get on with life. And yeah, here's the final slide, a little burrow poking through the ground. And with that, I think it goes over to your questions, and I'm very, very happy to hear questions. Lets me know what people are thinking, so fire away.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for your most insightful presentation on a very fascinating and unique garden destination. When you were talking about fungus and lichens, it reminded me of a book I just finished reading, and I recommend it to anybody who wants to know more about this and the interconnections of plant life. It's called "Finding the Mother Tree" by Suzanne Simard from British Columbia. It's a wonderful book, and you'll probably enjoy it because it's focused on the mycorrhizal fungi that connect trees.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating, but as an aside. So I found it amazing that to see the plant diversity possible in an area of zone 2B and 3. Your research is very much commended. The number of trees and woody plants displayed on a relatively small footprint is absolutely extraordinary and something to be proud of within the city of Saskatoon. And on that point, being located within Saskatoon, I can only assume that the Patterson Garden Arboretum is very important to the community. So I'll take the liberty of asking you the first question in this regard. What contributions do you feel the garden brings to the broader community of Saskatoon?
Well, to start with, we're one of the very few botanical collections in the province. So it's a great resource in that way. We're also, as I pointed out, close to the university. So students at the university can look around at the woody plants that they might be studying in their classes. We get all kinds of people visiting from around the immediate community and from around the city, and even groups from far away, like well, it doesn't sound far away, Prince Albert, but also people from it was actually 13 degrees colder in Prince Albert today, so than we were. So Jackie reported that to me. So it's pretty far away, but we get groups from all over the world, really, and visitors from all over the world.
Wonderful.
The people from the community come for just to walk sometimes. Sometimes they're walking their dogs. Sometimes they're having picnics. A lot of times they're looking at the labels and just really enjoying the collection and the beauty of the space.
Yeah, and of course, not being fenced, I can only assume that the access is free.
That's right. Oh, did I? Yeah, I forgot to mention that. It's free, and yeah, we
Kath, would you have I think there's quite a few questions that
So many questions, Jerry, so many. Alan, thanks for that. We've had a great chat going on here. We all just want to say you're a great photographer to begin with. So we have a lot. So here we go. It's a few minutes before 8. So if everyone's okay with it and wants to stick around, we're going to keep Alan till about 10 past 8 with these questions, if you don't mind. So let's begin. Jennifer Hamilton asks, how often are the trees watered?
Oh, I was afraid somebody might ask that. No, just kidding. We do water occasionally, and this year I saw some of the young seedlings looking a bit crisp, and I started watering. We don't have underground sprinklers or anything, but we can set up a watering cannon, it's called, or watering gun, and but mostly things are on their own. They're and anything that's well established, it would take several years of drought before there'd be any sign of it drying up. It's mostly the little trees that need watering occasionally. And we water when we plant something, and maybe a few times that year we'll water it. But we try to make sure the roots get right into the native soil and get well established, and then they're essentially on their own.
Okay. What is the area of the garden?
It's about six acres or two hectares, approximately.
Okay. What would cause flooding other than the spring melt, asks Marjorie Grant.
The flooding in that picture that I showed, that was summer thunderstorms. We get sort of cycles of where we get really hot days, and then at night we get big thunderstorms, and sometimes that'll go for many days. And but like all floods, it's also more complex than that. The drainage over the years, I think some areas got silted in, and nobody kept up the drainage, and we got a lot of water from the research area that we border. It all came flooding into the Arboretum, and there was just nowhere for it to go. We've since installed more culverts to channel that water away, and also cut little drainage swales to keep the water moving. So ideally, if we could do a flood of the Arboretum every year, but get all that water out of there a day later, the same day, that would be great. But and if that happens, that still might happen, but the water will drain away now.
At the other end of the spectrum, someone's asking, how are you protecting the garden from fire?
There's no fire protection in place. I guess there's little danger of wildfires making their way through Saskatoon. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Thank you for that question. We're gonna think about that.
Okay. So I'm about to ask a question. I may pronounce this incorrectly. I apologize. Mary Jane DeCoos says, I have a machia and its roots are extremely shallow and put up man-suckers. Very maddening. Does your machia have this habit? That's MJ from Montreal. Mary Jane.
Machia. Yeah, ours is Machia amurensis, and it doesn't produce suckers, but sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between seedlings and suckers. So Amurmachias, they produce a seed pod like a bean, and I think sometimes that seed pod will pop like a carigana, for instance, and throw some seeds around. So you can't really be sure that it's suckers unless you dig down, find a horizontal root that's connecting it to the main plant. But if it is an Amoromachia, I suspect that those are seedlings.
Okay. SJ is asking, do you ever take cuttings from any of the trees to propagate more? And
Yes,
someone
yes.
else asked, I'll just add this on. Do you basically just have one of everything?
Yeah, we do take cuttings, because as much as possible we try and keep the original specimen in place. Every once in a while we get surprised and can't propagate it that way, or it dies suddenly and we're out of luck. But that's what we try to do. And
One of each.
One of each. Oh yeah. Sometimes we have more than one. If it's from the same seed source, I like to plant 2 in its place, but also from different seed sources, because the collection is essentially a live experiment. So if, say, I can get a plant, for example, that the tulip tree, if I can get a seed from one northern location, and then a few years later we find one from another more northern location, then we like to put that in there too, in the hopes that one of those will do well. So we have a lot of duplications.
I have a couple of questions here that are concerning labeling. So the first one is from Dorothy. Are all the trees and shrubs labeled? And the second one is, besides Latin and English, have you considered French and Cree signage? And that's from Jim.
Yeah, we try to label everything. Sometimes I hold back on the label if I'm not sure the identity, and wait for something to flower so that I can get a positive ID on it. Sometimes we just get behind in it. Sometimes the labels get broken from our equipment in there. So the labeling is ongoing, and we went back to one of the original designs, which seemed to be lasting quite long. So it's aluminum tapes to put the names on a wood stand, and the only problem with that is with the very new labels that I'm making this year, we're actually filling those with information. So no, I never thought of including French and Cree, but thanks for that idea. We might be able to squeeze something in. Our label maker, we would have to get another label maker for Cree, because it's just this machine that we punch out the letters, and it's just a regular alphanumeric. What's it called? I don't know. Just regular letters. So there's no Cree letters on it.
Okay, thank you. Satya is asking, do you record plants and trees that are native prairie species, and also the plants and trees that were brought in by the prairie settlers? And she adds, wonderful collection.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. On the website, there's a few sections where we try to pick out. I think we have a section that says native Saskatchewan plants in the collection, and sorry, what was the rest of the question?
Once the settlers brought in.
Oh, the settlers. Yeah, just this year we're thinking of including. Well, I'll answer that assuming. Oh, okay, settlers, like plants they brought from the old country. Yeah, we're Also, well, what I can say is some of our cultivars that were developed by prairie plant breeders, we're trying to put a bit of information on the label to say who developed them, what year they were developed. But I guess the way to know whether something came from a different place is you look at the section where it talks about on the label where the plant is native to, and if it's not native to North America or Western North America, then it came from a different place.
Thank you. Do you have a seed bank created from the items in your arboretum, asks Peter O'Malley.
We have a kind of a seed collection where we get the seed that we grow the plants from, and every once in a while we collect some of our own seeds. Sometimes we send it to other gardens, but we're not keeping a seed bank.
Okay. Do you have any practices that support pollinators? Jim is asking.
There was an experiment where some students put in a home for leaf cutter bees, but in general, we just try to keep the arboretum as natural as possible. So if we have to use Roundup to keep the weeds down, we do that. But generally, it's a fairly natural place, and we're hoping that that's why we have a good insect population. But the problem with getting pollinators is that they go from one plant to another, spreading around the pollen. So it really doesn't benefit us in any way, because we're not really interested in hybrid seed. So we don't really have a need specifically for pollinators.
Good. Are you okay for a few more questions? We have a few more. Are you all right? Okay.
Sure.
What plant were you most surprised that it survived, asks Noah.
Okay. Last year I had a plant over winter, and it's called a single leaf ash, and it's native to the southwestern states, and often we'll grow several plants from the same seed lots, plant them in different places, like around the field lab here, and see what survives. So I was quite surprised to see this. It's called Fraxinus anomala. It's an anomaly because it only has a single leaf, whereas other ash have many leaves. That's one. Another one from the southwest was, it's called Camibatiaria. It's a fern bush. Once again, these are desert plants, and quite shocked to see that. The Calopanax that I showed a picture of, it's been in the collection for several years, and that's a surprise. Actually, I could list them for a long time. So I think he asked for one. So I'll try to control myself.
Okay. Maxine Anderson is asking, what is a fast-growing tree for Saskatchewan now, and not poplars?
Okay, I'm glad that little caveat was included, because that's the first thing that came to mind. Fast-growing tree. Well, the secret to fast growing is you got to give them the right conditions. A willow I would consider a fast growing tree, but it's only a fast growing tree if you give it a wet spot and a lot of sun. So we have willows in the Arboretum that are this high, that are probably like 5 years old. So it's all about location. But I'll just think about this for a minute. Mayday tree, tends to be a fast grower.
Maple,
Maple.
Manitoba.
Oh, Manitoba maple, green ash, and there's all kinds of shrubs that spring up very fast. What I would recommend is come and take a walk through the Arboretum and look at the dates and see what's growing fast. And a lot of things might start very slow, but then they start growing quicker. And my advice for anyone planting trees in the country, I think this person was in the country, was it? Plant a lot of different things and plant them close to each other. They can shelter each other, and one of them is bound to grow faster than the other ones, and in no time you'll have a diverse collection or diverse little some kind of tree that's growing fast.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a kind of a roundabout answer.
That's okay. Just a few more. Do you have reliable snow cover, and does that help with the success of the Carolinian species?
Yes, we always get snow. Sometimes it comes a little late in the season, but we always get snow, and I think that helps. But for some of them, as they get to a certain height, we have quite a few different ones in there right now, but as they get to a certain height, we don't really know if they're going to die back at the snow line. But some of them are fine. Trying to think where to draw the line at a Carolinian species, but say that yellow birch that I pointed out, and western or eastern red cedar, juniper, that's a few of them that are doing quite well. And there's different maples. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think snow cover does play a part.
Okay. I have two more that we'll ask you, and then there may be a few more that I'll send to you so we can get answers. But a couple more, and then we'll let you go. Margaret Ross is asking, do you have groups of the children attend for educational purposes?
We do. Yeah, we get children, school groups, usually not really young children. It's usually maybe high school groups, but young children are certainly welcome. We have a lot of little trees in the Arboretum, so as long as the teachers tell them where they can step and where they can't, then that's great. School groups. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, was there a second part to that question?
No, that was it.
Okay.
And here, this is the first time that the questions are too many. Well, they're not, there's never too many questions, but I don't want to keep you here all night. Trish is asking though, about the Korean cedar. She thought it was beautiful, and she said, why wouldn't someone want to plant a Korean cedar?
Yeah. First of all, if you visit the Arboretum this year, the Korean cedar has really died back, but we thought of that and took a cutting, and we have a little one growing on the west side of the Arboretum to replace it. So we've covered. Oh, actually,
Wouldn't you plant
it got eaten by a deer this year. But so don't come to the Arboretum expecting to see a healthy big Korean cedar. But why wouldn't anyone plant it? It's because its shape is unusual. If you look at the cedars that you see in people's yards and that are sold in garden centers, almost all of them are either round or a perfect dome. Even the wild type native cedar that's native in Manitoba is rarely seen. So I think that's why there's just it's not shaped as people are expecting a cedar to be shaped.
Before I hand it back to Jerry to wrap up, I just want to share a couple of comments with you that are comments. Patterson was a magic place during the pandemic, wonderful to walk the paths. By the way, the city of Saskatoon has designated Patterson Arboretum as a site of historical importance. More tables and benches would be awesome, LOL. And what a unique garden. Lots of people saying they're going to come and visit. Marvelously varied collection of both local and otherwise. And really enjoyed the tour. So I just wanted to let you know that people are raving, and thank you so much for that. There are a few more questions. I will send those to you and
Sure.
make sure everybody's get answered. Back to you, Jerry.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for those comments.
Thank you again, Alan, for a tremendous presentation and your willingness to stay on a little longer to answer the numerous questions. It obviously demonstrates how interested people were. Before, don't go away, Kath, because I think it'd be important just to share with the participants the upcoming gardens, not necessarily in order that they'll be presented, but the ones that we have slated for future presentations.
Sure.
Now?
So I'm very excited that we're just putting the finishing touches on the full schedule, and I look forward to sharing that with you very soon. Royal Roads is going to be from Victoria, will be coming, and we also have another Canadian garden. I just want to make sure I'm 100% confirmed on that before I say anything. We have asked Coastal Maine Botanical Garden to join us, and they have said yes. And the US Botanical Garden in Washington, DC has also agreed. So I'm very excited about that. And, you know, sometimes you just have to ask and see what happens. So Glasgow Botanical Garden will be joining in the summer. They're just right now, they're just pulling their staff together. And on the other side of the equator, where it's their busy season right now, I'm very pleased to say that I know it's not till August, but Kirstenbosch Botanical Garden, one of the best botanical gardens on the planet, has agreed, and they're going to come and do a presentation for us. I'll just warn you like months early that I think it'll be a late morning presentation because of the time difference. And I don't know about you, but I just prefer when they're live versus playing you something that's pre-recorded so we can ask some questions. But I'm telling you, it took a while to hear back from them because I find gardens are like garden people are like plants. They grow in their own time. And then out of the blue, Kirsten Bosch is like, yeah, we'll do it. So anyway, so that's a behind the scenes on what's going on. And I'm very excited. And I have to say, well, thank you to all the new people that we have joining us today. Saskatoon, you're represented for sure, but also a special thank you to all the people who have joined us again for the second season. There's so many of you that joined us for almost every presentation last year. And because of the success of those presentations, you know, when you're talking to someone like Kirsten Bosch, they're like, you're talking to those gardens, all these people attend. Yeah, we'd like to be part of it. So really a big thank you to everyone who joins us and participates.
Thanks, Kath. And again, before we close, I invite you to visit our website, jardin-canadensisgarden.ca, where you can learn about the plans for the Garden of Canada, and sign up for our newsletter, become a member. We'd love to have more members from outside the National Capital Region. It demonstrates the interest, the broad interest from across the country and elsewhere, the supporters from other countries like the United States and in Europe. And you can also make a donation if you would like. And please do follow us on Facebook. Again, thank you all again for your attendance this evening. Most enjoyable presentation. Alan, thank you again so much, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next get together. Just keep in touch, and we will provide you that information. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jackie.
Bye. Thanks, Jerry and Kath.